The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March of 1883, smudged with fingerprints and train soot, bearing news that would change Ethan Jameson's life forever, though he did not know it as he broke the wax seal with calloused fingers that had never been gentle with anything except horses. He sat at the rough-hewn table in his cabin outside Custer, South Dakota, reading the words 3 times before they made sense. Miss Tessa Ashford would arrive by train on the 20th of March, just 5 days hence, having traveled all the way from Philadelphia to become his wife. His brother had arranged it before dying of pneumonia that bitter winter, insisting with his last fevered breaths that Ethan needed someone, that no man should live alone in the Black Hills with only cattle and memories for company. Ethan had agreed simply to give his brother peace, never believing anything would come of it. But here was the letter, proof that Samuel had written to a matrimonial agency before his death, and now a woman was coming. A woman who knew nothing about him except what Samuel had written, which Ethan could only imagine had been generous lies. He was 32 years old, weathered by sun and hardship, owner of a struggling cattle ranch that demanded 18-hour days and gave back just enough to keep him fed. He had no charm, no grace with words, and no business taking a wife. The train station in Custer was little more than a platform with a roof, but on the 20th of March, it seemed to Ethan like the center of the universe. He stood with his hat in his hands, having scrubbed himself raw that morning and put on his only good shirt. The black wool coat he wore had belonged to Samuel, and it still smelled faintly of his brother's tobacco. Around him, the town bustled with its usual activity. Prospectors heading into the hills, merchants unloading freight, and a group of Lakota traders watching everything with expressions that gave nothing away. The train whistle screamed across the prairie, and Ethan's stomach tightened. He had rehearsed a greeting, something polite and welcoming, but the words had fled his mind entirely. What did one say to a mail-order bride? "Thank you for coming. Sorry my brother tricked you. Run while you still can." The train hissed to a stop, releasing clouds of steam that obscured the passengers as they began to disembark. Ethan scanned each face, looking for someone who might be looking for him. An older couple, 3 minors, a salesman with an oversized case. Then he saw her. She stood on the bottom step of the passenger car, one gloved hand gripping the rail with visible tension. She was small, perhaps 23 or 24 years old, dressed in a dark blue traveling dress that had seen better days. Her hair was brown, pinned up beneath a modest bonnet, and her face was pale with exhaustion or nerves or both. But it was not exhaustion that made Ethan's breath catch. It was the white silk scarf tied around her head, covering her left eye completely. She descended carefully, feeling for each step, and when she reached the platform, she turned her head slowly, scanning the crowd with her right eye. Ethan saw the uncertainty in her posture, the way she held herself as if braced for rejection. He moved forward before he could think better of it. "Miss Ashford." She turned toward his voice, and he saw her face fully. The right side was lovely, delicate features and a mouth that might have smiled easily once. The left side was hidden by the scarf, and he could see the faint outline of scarring at the edge where fabric met skin. "Mr. Jameson." Her voice was soft, Eastern accented, and trembling slightly. "Yes, madam, Ethan Jameson. Welcome to Custer." The words came out stiff, formal, and he cursed himself for sounding like a fool. Relief flooded her face, and she offered him a tentative smile. "Thank you. I was afraid no one would come." The admission was so honest it caught him off guard. He had expected practiced politeness, not vulnerability. "I gave my word I would be here. Can I take your bags? I have only the one trunk. The porter is bringing it." They stood in awkward silence while the porter wrestled her trunk onto the platform. It was smaller than Ethan had expected, and worn around the edges. Everything about Tessa Ashford spoke of genteel poverty, of someone who had once known better circumstances and was now making do with less. He paid the porter, lifted the trunk easily, and gestured toward the wagon he had left at the end of the platform. "The ranch is about 5 miles out. It is not much, but it is honest work. I am sure it will be fine." She walked beside him, her gait slightly uneven as she compensated for her limited vision. When they reached the wagon, she stopped, looking at it with what might have been apprehension. "May I help you up?" Ethan asked. "Yes, please. I sometimes misjudge distances." He set down the trunk and offered his hand. Her gloved fingers were small in his, and he could feel them trembling. He helped her onto the wagon seat, then loaded the trunk into the back. When he climbed up beside her and took the reins, he was acutely aware of the space between them, of how carefully she kept to her side of the seat. The road out of Custer wound through rolling prairie that was just beginning to green with spring growth. To the west, the Black Hills rose dark and imposing against a sky that threatened rain. Ethan kept the horses to a steady pace, trying to think of something to say. Small talk had never been his gift. "Your brother wrote that you had a cattle ranch," Tessa said finally, breaking the silence. "He made it sound very prosperous." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. Samuel always saw things better than they were. "Truth is, we have about 200 head and I am barely keeping ahead of the bank. If that is not what you expected, I would understand if you wanted to turn back." She was quiet for a moment, and he risked a glance at her profile. She was looking out at the landscape with her good eye, and there was something wistful in her expression. "What I expected," she said slowly, "was to die a spinster in my cousin's house in Philadelphia, taking care of her children and being reminded daily that I was a burden. Your brother's letter offered me a chance at a different life. I did not come expecting prosperity, Mr. Jameson. I came expecting honesty and perhaps a measure of kindness. If you can offer those, then the size of your herd matters very little to me." The words settled something in Ethan's chest. He had been prepared for disappointment, for tears or accusations. He had not been prepared for this quiet dignity. "I can offer honesty," he said, "and I will do my best at kindness, though I am out of practice with people. That makes 2 of us." She turned to look at him then, and he saw a flicker of humor in her expression. "I suppose we shall have to relearn together." The ranch house came into view as they crested a low hill. It was a simple structure, logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney at one end, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Beyond it stood the barn, 2 corrals, and a scattering of outbuildings in various states of repair. It was rough, practical, and painfully masculine. Ethan saw it through her eyes and winced. "It needs work," he admitted. "It needs a woman's touch," she corrected. "There is a difference." He pulled the wagon up to the porch and helped her down. Inside, the house was dim and smelled of coffee and wood smoke. The main room served as kitchen and living space, with a cast iron stove, a table, 2 chairs, and a ratty sofa that had been Samuel's pride. 2 doors led to small bedrooms. "You will take the larger bedroom," Ethan said, gesturing to the door on the right. "I will sleep out here until we figure things out." Tessa removed her bonnet, and he saw that her brown hair was streaked with premature gray at the temples. She looked around the room with an expression he could not read. "Mr. Jameson, we are to be married. Your brother's letter said you were seeking a wife, not a housekeeper. I understand that we are strangers, and I do not expect anything untoward, but neither do I wish to displace you from your own bed. Surely we can come to some reasonable arrangement." Her directness startled him. "I do not want you to feel pressured." "I do not feel pressured, I feel practical." She met his gaze steadily. I am not a delicate flower despite appearances. I came here to build a life, and that requires honesty between us. So let me be honest. I am blind in my left eye. I was born with a cataract that could not be removed. As I grew older, the eye began to cause me pain and turned inward, so I had it removed last year. I wear the scarf because the scarring disturbs people, and I have learned it is easier to hide it than to endure their stares. But if we are to be married, you should know exactly what you are getting. Ethan stood very still, processing this. He had seen plenty of disfigurement in his life. Ranch work was dangerous and most men bore scars, but he understood what it meant for a woman, how society judged female worth by appearance. "May I see?" he asked. She hesitated, then reached up and untied the scarf with shaking hands. Beneath it, the left side of her face bore the marks of surgery. The socket was sunken and closed, the skin puckered with scars that were still pink and healing. She kept her gaze down, not meeting his eyes. Ethan stepped closer and tilted her chin up gently with one finger. She flinched at the touch, but did not pull away. He studied her face carefully, the way he would study a horse he was thinking of buying, looking for signs of overall health and spirit rather than superficial flaws. "You see more than most," he said finally, her eye widened. "What? People with too good eyes miss half of what is important because they are too busy looking at surfaces. You have learned to look deeper. That is a gift, not a curse." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she brushed it away impatiently. "That is the kindest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time. It is just the truth." He stepped back, giving her space. "Keep the scarf if it makes you comfortable, but you do not need to hide from me. Now, are you hungry? I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage bacon and eggs." She laughed, a small surprised sound, and retied the scarf. "I am very hungry, actually, and I am a good cook, so perhaps that is one useful thing I can contribute." "That would make you more valuable than gold in these parts," Ethan said. "Most of the miners would marry you just for the promise of decent bread." They worked together in the kitchen, finding a rhythm that was awkward but not unpleasant. Tessa moved carefully, always turning her head to compensate for her blind side, but her hands were quick and capable. She found ingredients he had forgotten he owned and produced a meal that was simple but far better than anything he had managed in months. Over dinner, they talked. She told him about Philadelphia, about her parents who had died when she was young, about the cousin who had taken her in out of duty rather than love. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about coming west with Samuel to find their fortune, about the hard years of building the ranch only to watch it struggle. "Your brother loved you very much," Tessa said. "That came through in his letter." "He was a better man than me," Ethan replied. "He saw possibilities where I only saw problems." "Perhaps you simply need someone to help you see them," she smiled. "We do complement each other in that regard. I am blind on the left, and you seem determined to look only at the dark side of things. Between us, we might manage a balanced view." He found himself smiling back, a genuine expression that felt strange on his face. "When would you like to have the ceremony?" "Whenever you think best. I assume there is a minister in town, Reverend Hawthorne. He travels a circuit, but he should be back in Custer by Sunday. I could ask him to come out here if you prefer privacy." "That sounds perfect." They fell into a routine over the next few days that felt surprisingly natural. Tessa took over the cooking and began cleaning the house with a determination that made Ethan feel ashamed of how he had been living. She washed curtains he had forgotten were supposed to be white, scrubbed floors until they gleamed, and somehow made the rough cabin feel like a home. In return, he showed her the ranch, explaining the cattle business with a patience he had not known he possessed. She was genuinely interested, asking questions that were intelligent and practical. She wanted to know about breeding lines, about grass quality, about the challenges of marketing beef. When he took her to see the herd, she stood at the fence rail and watched the cattle with focused attention. "They are beautiful," she said. "They are stubborn, ornery, and prone to dying at the worst possible moment," he corrected, but there was no heat in it, like most worthwhile things then. She turned to look at him. "You care about them. I can hear it in your voice." "I have spent 10 years building this herd. Each one represents months of work, of gambling on which calves will survive, of hoping the weather holds and the prices stay fair. They are more than just cattle to me. I understand. They are your legacy. They are supposed to be." He leaned on the fence, staring out at the grazing animals. "Samuel and I always planned to build something that would last. Now he is gone, and I am trying to hold onto his dream with both hands while it slips away." Tessa placed her small hand over his where it rested on the rail. "Then we will hold on together. 4 hands are better than 2. Reverend Hawthorne arrived the following Sunday, a jovial man with a white beard and eyes that had seen too much suffering to judge anyone harshly. He performed the ceremony in the ranch house parlor with 2 ranch hands Ethan had hired as witnesses. Tessa wore a simple gray dress that had been her mother's, and Ethan wore Samuel's good coat. The words were traditional, the promises eternal, and when Ethan kissed his bride, it was a chaste brush of lips that nonetheless sent warmth through his entire body. That night, they lay in the larger bedroom, carefully not touching in the darkness. The bed was big enough for distance but small enough that Ethan was aware of every breath she took. "Are you awake?" Tessa whispered. "Yes, I am nervous, so am I," she laughed softly. "That is oddly comforting." "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," Ethan said. "This can be a marriage in name only until you are comfortable." "I do not want that." She turned toward him, and he felt her hand find his in the darkness. "I want a real marriage, Ethan. I want partnership and trust and eventually, I hope, affection. But I need you to be patient with me. I have never been with a man and I am afraid of disappointing you." "You could not disappoint me," he squeezed her hand. "But I am glad you told me. We will take things slow." "Thank you." She was quiet for a moment. "May I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think you could ever care for me? Not just as a partner or a housekeeper, but as a wife?" "Truly," Ethan chose his words carefully. "I think I already do. You are brave and honest and kinder than anyone has been to me in a long time. That is a good foundation. The rest will come." She moved closer and he felt her head rest against his shoulder. "Then I am content." They fell asleep like that, clothed and chaste, but together in a way that mattered more than passion. It was a beginning. The weeks that followed were a revelation to Ethan. He had lived alone for so long that he had forgotten the pleasure of companionship. Tessa rose with him before dawn, cooking breakfast while he did the morning chores. She packed him lunches that were thoughtful and filling, and in the evenings they worked side by side on the endless tasks that ranch life demanded. She proved to have a quick mind for figures, taking over the account books and finding errors that had been costing him money for months. "You have been undercharging for your beef," she told him one evening, looking up from the ledger with a frown. "The market price in Deadwood is 20% higher than what you have been accepting." "The buyers said that was the going rate," Ethan protested. "The buyers lied." She tapped the page with her pencil. "I got these figures from the mining companies directly. They are paying premium prices for quality beef, and yours is quality. You have been letting them cheat you." Ethan felt anger stir in his gut, not at Tessa but at his own gullibility. "I will speak to them." "We will speak to them," she corrected. "I am your wife. Your business is my business." The next cattle sale, Tessa accompanied him to Deadwood. The buyers took one look at her and assumed she was decoration. They offered their usual low price with practiced sympathy about market conditions. Tessa listened politely, then pulled out a sheaf of papers. "These are the prices the mining companies paid for beef last month," she said calmly. "Your offer is substantially below market value. We know our cattle are prime stock, and we know what they are worth. Either meet the fair price, or we will sell directly to the mines and cut you out entirely." The head buyer sputtered, his face going red. "Now see here, madam, you do not understand how this business works. I understand that you have been cheating my husband for at least 2 years, possibly longer." Her voice remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath the courtesy. "I understand that there are other buyers who would be delighted to establish a relationship with a reliable supplier. And I understand that if word gets around that you have been manipulating prices, your reputation will suffer considerably. So let us try again. What is your offer?" They got their price. On the ride home, Ethan could not stop grinning. "Where did you learn to negotiate like that?" "My father was a merchant," Tessa said. "He taught me figures and trade before he died. My cousin disapproved, said it was unladylike, but I always enjoyed it." She looked pleased with herself. "Did I do well? You were magnificent." He reached over and took her hand. "Thank you. We are partners, remember? 4 hands are better than 2. That night, their relationship shifted. Ethan kissed her properly for the first time, not a chaste peck but a real kiss that left them both breathless. She responded with an eagerness that surprised and delighted him. When they made love, it was tender and awkward and perfect, 2 people learning each other with patience and growing affection. Afterward, Tessa lay with her head on his chest, tracing patterns on his skin with her fingertips. "I am happy," she said, wonder in her voice. "I did not think I would ever be able to say that. Neither did I." He kissed the top of her head. "You have given me back something I lost when Samuel died. Hope, I suppose. The sense that the future might be worth working toward. We will build that future together," she promised. "For ourselves and for the children we will have someday. You want children, very much, do you?" "I never let myself think about it before, but yes, with you I do." Spring turned to summer, and the ranch prospered in ways it never had before. Tessa's management of the finances gave them breathing room, and Ethan found himself able to invest in improvements he had only dreamed of. They built a new barn, repaired fences, and bought a young bull with excellent bloodlines. The cattle thrived on the rich prairie grass, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was building something sustainable. But it was not just the ranch that flourished. His marriage to Tessa deepened into something profound. He loved her practical nature, her wry humor, the way she never complained about the hardships of ranch life. She loved his quiet strength, his gentleness with the animals, the way he listened to her ideas as if they mattered. They learned to anticipate each other's needs, to work together with the kind of seamless cooperation that came from genuine partnership. The town of Custer was less accepting. When Tessa accompanied Ethan to church or to the general store, she endured stares and whispers. Some people were kind, but others made their disapproval clear. One Sunday after services, a woman named Harriet Wilcox cornered Tessa while Ethan was speaking with the minister. "It must be very difficult for you," Harriet said with false sympathy, "being unable to see properly." "I imagine your husband has to take care of everything." Tessa smiled blandly. "Actually, I manage our accounts, negotiate our sales, and run our household quite efficiently. My vision is limited, but my capabilities are not. Still, it seems selfish to burden a man with damaged goods. If you had any decency, you would have stayed back east where you belong." The words hit like a physical blow, but Tessa kept her composure. "If you will excuse me, Mrs. Wilcox, I need to find my husband." She walked away with her head high, but Ethan saw the hurt in her face when he met her outside. He took one look at her expression and demanded to know what happened. When she told him, his jaw tightened with anger. "Who was it?" "It does not matter. It does to me." Tessa put her hand on his arm. "Ethan, people like that are not worth our time or energy. I learned long ago that some people need to tear others down to feel better about themselves. Their opinions mean nothing. Their opinions hurt you. Yes, but your opinion lifts me up. That is what matters." She squeezed his arm. "Take me home. I want to be where we are appreciated." He did, but the incident gnawed at him. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Black Hills gold and crimson, he brought it up again. "Does it bother you what people say?" "Sometimes," Tessa admitted, "but not as much as it used to. When I lived in Philadelphia, I let other people's judgments define me. I believed I was damaged, worthless, a burden. Coming here, marrying you, building this life together has shown me that I am none of those things. I am capable and valuable and loved. That knowledge is armor against small-minded cruelty." "You are all of those things," Ethan agreed. "But you are also brave, and I think I have been taking that for granted. It took courage to come out here to marry a stranger. It takes courage to face people like Harriet Wilcox with grace. You are stronger than I am." "We are strong together," she corrected. "That is the point of marriage, is it not? To be stronger together than we could be apart." He pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Ethan thought about how much his life had changed in just a few months. The loneliness that had been his constant companion was gone, replaced by a sense of belonging he had never expected to find. Tessa had not just filled the empty spaces in his house but in his heart as well. In August, Tessa realized she was pregnant. She told Ethan one evening after dinner, her face glowing with joy and nervousness. "Are you happy?" she asked. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "Happy does not begin to cover it. You have given me everything, Tessa. A home, a purpose, and now a child. I am the luckiest man in South Dakota." "We are both lucky," she said, kissing him soundly. "This child will be born into a home full of love." The pregnancy was not easy. Tessa suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and her limited vision made navigating the increasingly unfamiliar terrain of her own body difficult. But she approached it with the same practical determination she brought to everything else, and Ethan marveled at her resilience. He became fiercely protective, hiring a ranch hand to take over the heavier chores so he could stay close to the house. He worried constantly, imagining every possible disaster, until Tessa finally sat him down and told him to stop. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she said patiently. "I am healthy and strong, and Dr. Morrison says everything is progressing well. You cannot control every outcome, Ethan. All you can do is trust that we will face whatever comes together." "I cannot lose you," he said quietly. "You have become the center of my world. You will not lose me." She took his hands. "I am not going anywhere. I have too much to live for." Winter came early that year, with snow falling in October and temperatures dropping well below freezing. Ethan spent long hours ensuring the cattle were sheltered and fed, knowing that a harsh winter could devastate the herd. Tessa stayed inside, growing rounder and more uncomfortable as the baby grew. On a particularly bitter night in February of 1884, her labor began. Ethan rode through a blizzard to fetch Dr. Morrison, his heart pounding with fear. By the time they returned, Tessa was well into active labor, attended by a neighbor woman named Martha Green who had experience with births. The labor lasted 18 hours. Ethan paced the main room, listening to Tessa's cries and feeling utterly helpless. He had faced cattle stampedes, blizzards, and near bankruptcy without flinching, but the sound of his wife in pain unmade him completely. When Dr. Morrison finally emerged, grim-faced and exhausted, Ethan's heart stopped. "She is fine," the doctor said quickly, seeing his expression. "Both of them are fine. You have a son, Mr. Jameson, a big, healthy boy." Ethan sagged with relief so profound he had to sit down. "Can I see them? Give Martha a few minutes to get them settled, then yes." When he finally entered the bedroom, Tessa looked exhausted but radiant. She held a bundle of blankets, and when Ethan approached, she pulled back the fabric to reveal a red, wrinkled face with eyes squeezed shut and tiny fists waving. "Meet your son," she whispered. "I thought we could name him Samuel, after your brother." Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. He sat on the edge of the bed and carefully took the baby, cradling him with surprising gentleness. Samuel Jameson was solid and warm, already rooting against his chest in search of food. "He is perfect," Ethan said hoarsely. "You are perfect, thank you. We made him together." Tessa smiled tiredly. "He has your chin, I think, and your stubbornness if those fists are any indication." Ethan handed the baby back and kissed Tessa gently. "Rest now. I will take care of everything." She was asleep before he left the room. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching his wife and son, and felt a happiness so complete it was almost painful. This was what Samuel had wanted for him, he realized. Not just a wife or a helper, but a family. A reason to keep fighting, to keep building, to keep hoping. The winter gradually loosened its grip, giving way to a muddy, temperamental spring. Samuel thrived, growing at an alarming rate and filling the house with his cries and gurgles. Tessa recovered her strength and threw herself back into ranch management, often conducting business with the baby strapped to her chest in a sling she had sewn herself. Ethan watched her negotiate with buyers while nursing their son, and thought that he had never seen anything more beautiful. She had bloomed into motherhood, her confidence growing with each passing day. The woman who had stepped off the train a year ago, uncertain and scarred, was gone. In her place was someone powerful, someone who knew her own worth. One afternoon in late May, Ethan came back from checking fence lines to find Tessa on the porch, holding Samuel and staring out at the prairie with an odd expression. "What is it?" he asked. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now from what I expected." She turned to him and he saw tears in her eye. "A year ago I thought my life was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my days as a spinster aunt, unwanted and useless. Now I have a husband who loves me, a son who depends on me, and a purpose that matters. It is almost too much happiness to comprehend." Ethan climbed the porch steps and gathered both of them into his arms. "You deserve every bit of it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Tessa. You and Samuel both." "We are lucky to have each other," she agreed. "All three of us." The years that followed were not without challenges. There were droughts that withered the grass and forced them to sell cattle at a loss. There were harsh winters that killed livestock despite their best efforts. There were illnesses and injuries, close calls that left them shaken. But they faced everything together, and somehow that made even the hardest times bearable. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious toddler with his father's dark hair and his mother's determination. He followed Ethan everywhere, mimicking his walk and his mannerisms in a way that was both endearing and hilarious. When he was 2, Tessa became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. Their daughter was born on a warm June evening in 1886, arriving so quickly that Dr. Morrison barely made it in time. She was small and delicate, with a cap of dark hair and lungs that could raise the roof. They named her Sarah after Tessa's mother, and Samuel was immediately smitten with his baby sister. Gentle, Tessa reminded him constantly as he tried to pat Sarah's head with his chubby hands. "She is very small." "Baby," Samuel said proudly, as if he had personally created her. Ethan watched his family with a contentment that still sometimes took him by surprise. He had everything he had never known he wanted. A thriving ranch, a wife who was his equal partner in every way, and 2 healthy children who would carry on the legacy he and Samuel had started. The ranch continued to prosper. With Tessa's financial acumen and Ethan's ranching skills, they expanded their operation, buying more land and increasing the herd. They built a larger house, one with proper bedrooms for the children and a real parlor for entertaining. It was still simple by city standards, but it was solid and comfortable and entirely theirs. Tessa became known throughout the region as a woman to be reckoned with. Other ranchers' wives came to her for advice on managing household finances. Businessmen who had once dismissed her now treated her with respect, having learned the hard way that she was sharper than most of them. The whispers and stares that had once followed her faded, replaced by a reputation for competence and fairness. One Sunday after church, Harriet Wilcox approached Tessa with a stiff expression. "I owe you an apology," she said abruptly. "What I said to you years ago was cruel and unfounded. You have proven yourself to be an asset to this community, and I was wrong to judge you." Tessa was taken aback but recovered quickly. "Thank you for saying so, Mrs. Wilcox. I appreciate your honesty. Your husband is a lucky man. We are lucky to have each other." Tessa corrected gently and left it at that. That evening she told Ethan about the encounter. He was still inclined to hold a grudge, but Tessa waved it away. "People can change," she said. "And grudges are heavy things to carry. I would rather travel light." "You are a better person than I am," Ethan said. "No, I just have less time for nonsense. Between the children and the ranch and you, my life is too full for pettiness." As the children grew, Ethan taught them everything he knew about ranching. Samuel was a natural, fearless on horseback and instinctively good with the cattle. Sarah was more cautious but had her mother's mind for details, noticing things others missed. Together they were formidable, and Ethan knew the ranch would be in good hands when he was gone, but that was far in the future. For now there was work to do, a life to live, and a family to cherish. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the chores were done, Ethan and Tessa would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the Black Hills. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Ethan asked once. "Never," Tessa said immediately. "This is home." "This has always been home. I just did not know it until I found you." "I am glad you answered that letter," Ethan said. "I am glad you took a chance on a failing rancher with no charm and fewer prospects. You had prospects, you just could not see them." She leaned against him. "And you had something more important than charm. You had honesty and kindness and the capacity to see beyond surfaces. That is what I fell in love with." "I fell in love with your courage," Ethan said, "and your stubbornness and your brilliant mind. You saved me, Tessa." "In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other," she corrected. "That is what love does." In 1890 they celebrated their 7th anniversary. The ranch now boasted 500 head of cattle, several horses, and a reputation for quality that extended throughout the Dakota Territory. Ethan had been elected to the local Ranchers Association, and Tessa had been invited to speak at a women's forum in Rapid City about financial management. They were respected, successful, and happiest of all, deeply in love. Samuel was 6 and starting school in Custer, riding into town each day on his pony with the seriousness of someone twice his age. Sarah was 4 and already showing signs of being as formidable as her mother. They were considering having another child, though Tessa pointed out that between the children they had and the ranch, their hands were already quite full. One more would not hurt, Ethan argued. One more would mean I am pregnant and useless for half a year, Tessa countered. Who would keep you from being robbed blind by the cattle buyers? You have taught me well. I think I could manage. You think you could manage, she teased. That is not the same as actually managing. They were still debating when Tessa discovered she was pregnant again. This time she carried twins. Dr. Morrison confirmed it in her 4th month and both parents were stunned. Twins run in my family, Tessa said weakly. I should have warned you. Warned me, Ethan laughed, though there was a note of panic in it. We will need a bigger house. We will need more of everything. The twin pregnancy was difficult. Tessa was confined to bed rest for the last 2 months, and Ethan hired help to manage the household and watch the children. He sat with her every evening, reading aloud or simply holding her hand, worried sick despite her assurances that she was fine. The twins were born in March of 1891, a boy and a girl. They named them Thomas and Grace, and both were healthy despite being smaller than their siblings had been. Samuel and Sarah were fascinated by the babies, and the house was suddenly very crowded and very loud. What were we thinking? Tessa asked one exhausted evening as she nursed both twins while Sarah tugged on her skirt, and Samuel reported an urgent crisis involving his pony. We were thinking we wanted a full life, Ethan said, scooping up Sarah and dispatching Samuel to deal with the pony emergency himself. And we certainly got one. Despite the chaos, or perhaps because of it, they were happy. The children filled the house with noise and laughter, and the ranch continued to thrive. Ethan hired more hands to help with the work, and Tessa trained a young woman from town to help with the household and the children. It was not the life either of them had expected, but it was better than anything they could have imagined. As the years passed, the children grew and the ranch evolved with them. Samuel became Ethan's right hand, taking on more responsibility with each passing year. Sarah showed an aptitude for breeding decisions that rivaled her father's, and the twins, though young, were already proving themselves capable. The Jameson Ranch was becoming a family operation in the truest sense. In 1895, on a warm evening in May, Ethan and Tessa celebrated their 12th anniversary. The children had been sent to stay with neighbors for the night, giving them a rare moment of privacy. They sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge and reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "Do you remember the day I arrived?" Tessa asked. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met," Ethan said, "standing on that platform with your head up, ready to face whatever came." "I remember thinking you looked kind," Tessa said. "Your eyes were sad but kind. I knew immediately that your brother had not lied, that you were a good man." "I almost sent you back," Ethan admitted. "I thought I had nothing to offer you." "You had everything to offer," she corrected. "You just did not know it yet." Ethan took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "You know what I have never told you? That thing I said the first day about you seeing more than most. I meant it, but not the way you thought." "What do you mean?" "I meant you see people clearly. You saw through my gruffness to the loneliness underneath. You saw potential in a failing ranch and a broken man. You saw a future worth fighting for when I had given up. That is your real gift, Tessa. Not just surviving your own challenges, but seeing clearly enough to help others through theirs." Tears glimmered in her eye. "You gave me the chance to use that gift. You made me believe I was worth something. You were always worth something. I just had the privilege of being there when you realized it." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the night deepen around them. After all these years, Ethan still marveled at how a single letter, a single decision to honor his dying brother's wish, had transformed his entire existence. He had gained not just a wife but a partner, a love that had deepened with every passing year into something unshakable. "What do you think Samuel would say if he could see us now?" Tessa asked softly, referring to his brother. "I think he would say he told me so," Ethan replied with a smile. "He always knew I needed someone. He just had better judgment than I did about who and what I needed." "He gave us a great gift," Tessa said. "Writing that letter, arranging for me to come here. He gave us each other. We will have to tell the children about him when they are older, make sure they know who to thank for this family." "They will know," Tessa promised. "And they will understand that family is not just about blood. It is about choosing to love and support each other, day after day, through everything life brings." As if on cue, a coyote howled in the distance, and the cattle lowed softly in response. The sounds of the ranch at night, familiar and comforting. This was home, Ethan thought. Not just the land or the house, but this moment, this woman, this life they had built together from nothing but hope and determination. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. In 1897, Sarah decided she wanted to study veterinary medicine, an unusual ambition for a girl, but one that Tessa and Ethan supported wholeheartedly. They arranged for her to apprentice with Dr. Morrison, who was delighted to have such an eager student. Samuel took over more of the day-to-day ranch management, proving himself as capable as his father had hoped. The twins, now 6 years old, were inseparable and into everything. Thomas had his father's quiet strength, while Grace had inherited Tessa's sharp tongue and sharper mind. Together, they kept the household in a constant state of barely controlled chaos that their parents secretly enjoyed. In 1899, the ranch faced its greatest challenge yet. A severe drought gripped the region, withering the grass and drying up water sources. Cattle died by the dozens despite their best efforts, and many smaller ranchers were forced to sell out to larger operations. Ethan and Tessa held emergency meetings every night, poring over the books and trying to find a way to survive. "We could sell off half the herd," Ethan suggested. "Take the loss now and rebuild when the drought breaks. Or we could drill a deeper well," Tessa countered. "It would be expensive, but if we can find water, we can keep the herd alive until the rains come. And if the well comes up dry, we lose everything." "If we sell half the herd, we might lose everything anyway. We would have to start over from scratch, and we are not young anymore, Ethan. I would rather gamble on water than on our ability to rebuild at our age." It was a difficult decision, but in the end, they chose to drill. For 3 weeks, a drilling crew worked around the clock while Ethan and Tessa watched their savings evaporate and prayed for success. When they finally hit water at 200 feet, the relief was so profound that Ethan actually cried. The well saved them. They were able to keep most of the herd alive, and when the rains finally came in the fall, the ranch was still intact. Other ranchers were not so lucky, and several approached Ethan about buying their land. He and Tessa discussed it carefully and decided to buy 2 adjoining properties, nearly doubling their acreage. "We are building an empire," Tessa joked. "We are building security for our children," Ethan corrected, "so they never have to face the kind of uncertainty we did." By 1900, the Jameson Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. They employed a dozen workers, ran over 1,000 head of cattle, and were expanding into horse breeding as well. Ethan, now 49 years old, had gray in his hair and lines around his eyes, but he was healthier and happier than he had been in his youth. Tessa, at 41, was still beautiful. The scarf she wore now more habit than necessity, as she had long since stopped caring what strangers thought of her appearance. Their children were growing into capable adults. Samuel, at 16, was already being courted by other ranchers who saw his skill with cattle and wanted him to marry their daughters. Sarah, at 14, was more interested in healing animals than catching a husband, much to her parents' amusement. The twins, at 9, were terrors who kept everyone on their toes. One evening in December, as the first snow of winter began to fall, Ethan and Tessa sat by the fire in their parlor. The children were all in bed, the house was quiet, and they were simply enjoying each other's company. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had not answered Samuel's letter?" Ethan asked. Tessa considered the question seriously. "I suppose I would still be in Philadelphia, living with my cousin and her family. Probably teaching her daughters needlework or music, growing older and more bitter with each passing year. It would have been a safe life, but a small one, and I would never have known what I was missing." "I would have been alone," Ethan said. "The ranch probably would have failed. Even if it had not, I would have been just existing, not living. You gave me back my life, Tessa. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to build something that mattered." "We gave those things to each other," she insisted. "That is what partnership means." Ethan pulled her close, and they sat watching the flames dance. After nearly 17 years of marriage, he was more in love with his wife than he had been on their wedding day. She knew all his flaws and loved him anyway. She challenged him, supported him, and made him want to be better. She was his best friend, his partner, his everything. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too." She turned her head to kiss him. Always. The new century brought new opportunities. In 1901, the railroad expanded, making it easier to ship cattle to market. Ethan and Tessa took advantage of this, negotiating contracts with buyers in Chicago and Kansas City. Sarah completed her apprenticeship and became the first female veterinarian in the territory, setting up practice in Custer and quickly becoming indispensable to the ranching community. Samuel married in 1903, choosing a practical young woman named Emily who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the eastern edge of the ranch property and began running their own small herd, with plans to eventually take over the entire operation. Ethan watched his son step into leadership and felt a profound satisfaction. This was what he had worked for, what Samuel had died hoping for. A legacy that would continue. The twins were teenagers now, still close but developing distinct personalities. Thomas wanted to be a foreman, to manage cattle operations for large ranches. Grace, like her mother, showed a talent for business and finance. She talked about going to university, something nearly unheard of for a woman, but Ethan and Tessa encouraged her dreams. "The world is changing," Tessa said. "Women can do things now that were impossible when I was young. Grace should have every opportunity we can give her." "Agreed," Ethan said, "though I will miss her when she goes." "She will come back," Tessa assured him. "This land gets into your blood. None of our children will stray far." In 1905, Ethan and Tessa celebrated their 22nd anniversary. They were grandparents now, with Samuel and Emily expecting their first child. The ranch covered over 5,000 acres and was recognized throughout the Dakotas as a model operation. They had survived drought, blizzards, financial panic, and the countless smaller crises that made up ranch life. But more than that, they had built a marriage that was the envy of everyone who knew them. Their love had deepened with time, becoming something richer and more complex than the tentative affection they had started with. They were partners in every sense, sharing decisions and responsibilities, supporting each other through triumphs and disasters. One warm summer evening, they walked out to the place where Ethan had first brought Tessa to see the cattle. The view was much the same, though the herd was larger, and the buildings in the distance more substantial. They stood at the fence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. You remember the first time we stood here? Tessa asked. You said the cattle were beautiful and I said they were stubborn and ornery. You were trying so hard not to hope, she said. Not to believe that things might work out. I had been disappointed too many times. It seemed safer not to hope. And now, Ethan turned to look at his wife. Her hair was more gray than brown now, and there were lines around her eye from years of squinting against the sun. The scarf she wore was silk, expensive, chosen for beauty rather than concealment. She was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Now I hope for everything, he said. I hope our grandchildren inherit this land and love it the way we do. I hope Sarah finds someone who appreciates her brilliance. I hope the twins find their own paths and are happy. And I hope that, when my time comes, I go before you, because I cannot imagine facing a day without you in it. Tessa's eye filled with tears. That is a beautiful sentiment, but I have no intention of letting you go anywhere for a very long time. We have too much left to do. What is left to do? We have built a successful ranch, raised 4 children, and created a legacy. What more is there? Living, she said simply. Enjoying what we have built, watching our grandchildren grow, teaching them everything we have learned. Growing old together. That is not a small thing, Ethan. That is everything. He kissed her then, a long, sweet kiss that held 22 years of love and commitment. When they finally pulled apart, the sky was dark and full of stars. Take me home, Tessa said. We are home, Ethan replied, gesturing to the land around them. This has always been home. Then take me to bed, she corrected with a smile that made him laugh. They walked back to the house hand in hand. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary together. Behind them, the cattle settled for the night, and the land stretched out vast and peaceful under the star-filled sky. The years that followed were gentle ones. Ethan and Tessa gradually handed over more responsibility to Samuel and Emily, though they remained active in the ranch operations. They delighted in their growing family. Samuel and Emily had 3 children in quick succession, filling the main house with noise and laughter whenever they visited. Sarah married a fellow veterinarian she met at a conference in Sioux Falls, and they set up a joint practice that served ranchers throughout the region. Thomas became foreman of one of the largest ranches in Montana, while Grace did indeed go to university, studying business and economics before returning to help manage the family's increasingly complex financial interests. All 4 children had inherited their parents' work ethic and values, and all remained close despite the demands of their own lives. In 1910, Ethan turned 59 and Tessa 51. They were slowing down, their bodies bearing the accumulated wear of decades of hard work, but their minds were as sharp as ever and their love undiminished. On quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch the sun set, reminiscing about the journey that had brought them to this place. Do you have any regrets? Tessa asked one such evening. Ethan thought about it carefully. I wish Samuel had lived to see what we built. I wish we could have given him this life, but other than that, no, I have been blessed beyond anything I deserved. You deserved every bit of it, Tessa said firmly. You are a good man, Ethan Jameson, the best man I have ever known. I am only as good as you have made me, he replied. You saw something in me that I could not see in myself. You believed in me when I had stopped believing. Everything good in my life stems from the day you stepped off that train. That letter your brother wrote saved both our lives, Tessa said softly. I was dying in Philadelphia, just slowly and quietly. He gave me a chance to live really live, and you made that chance into a reality. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky. The ranch spread out around them, a testament to their partnership and perseverance. In the barn, Horses whinnied softly. In the distance, cattle moved across the darkening prairie. The sounds of home, of a life well lived. "I love you," Ethan said, as he did every night. "I love you too," Tessa replied, as she always had, and in that simple exchange was the truth of their marriage. Love declared and reaffirmed day after day, year after year, building into something unshakable. They had faced everything life threw at them and emerged stronger. They had built a family, a legacy, a love story for the ages. As darkness fell and the stars emerged, they remained on the porch, two people who had once been strangers brought together by a letter and a promise. They had chosen to see beyond surfaces, to value character over appearance, partnership over perfection. And in doing so, they had found something precious and rare. The mail-order bride who was blind in one eye and the cowboy who said she saw more than most had proven that sometimes the most unexpected connections lead to the most extraordinary love stories. Their love had transformed not just their own lives, but had rippled outward, creating a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. And as they finally rose to go inside, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring together as they always had, they carried with them the absolute certainty that they had made the right choice all those years ago. In finding each other, they had found home, and that, in the end, was everything.